Hi everyone, and welcome to another week of UXDX. My name is Catherine Madden and I will be your host for tonight. Just a few quick things for those of you who are new to tuning in. The world is full of bad software and we are on a mission to help teams build an environment that cannot build bad software. So how do we do that? It's really enabling the team. So helping teams move from project-focused delivery to product-focused teams. If you've got any questions tonight or today, this afternoon or morning, wherever you are, there's a few ways to do it. You can do it on the website itself directly. And then you can also, if you're on Slack, there's an Ask the Speaker channel, and there is a few of you on LinkedIn. You can ask questions there as well. Tonight, we've got a great lineup of speakers for you, and I'm going to hand you over to our first speaker of the night, Caio, who's a product manager for Volkswagen Digital Solutions. We know the Volkswagen Digital Solutions team pretty well. They've been involved in UXDX in the past, and so we're excited to hear what Caio has to say. So welcome, how are you?
Hello, wow, good afternoon, good evening. I'm doing great, Catherine. Happy to be here.
Great. Fantastic. I am going to let you take the stage and take over. I'm going to take a back seat and I'll be on the other side to ask you the questions. So look forward to it and talk to you soon.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Well, once again, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on the time you will be watching this in the future. Today, I would like to share with you a bit on boosting team ownership and accountability using something that I fall in love years ago, that is 4DX, not a four-dimensional experience, but four disciplines of execution method. And before explaining all of this is about, let me ask you something. Imagine the following. It's the beginning of the semester. Your team is excited about the semester goals. You set together, you define where you want to go, you define all the measures you want to work on, all the numbers you would like to achieve at the end of that specific time frame. And then you blink, something happened, and suddenly it's the end of the semester. Your team, they forgot about the semester goals, and now everyone is asking themselves, what happened? We didn't work on this specific thing. Now it's the deadline. What should we do? Have you ever lived in a situation like this? Picture yourself, perhaps yes, perhaps no. If no, I'm sure that you know at least one person who lived something similar to this. Who's me? I lived that in the past, and I would like to share with you how, in recent experience, myself and the team I was part of, we managed to overcome such a challenge. And understanding why such a thing happened is very important. It's fundamental to overcome it. Before answering that question, my name is Caio Arruda, as already mentioned. I'm working as product manager for Volkswagen Digital Solutions. That's a pretty big name, so VWDS tends to be our way to go. Working there for a while and sharing this experience that my team and myself lived in the previous months, last year, actually starting last year, sharing this a bit with you. As I mentioned, one of the very important steps to understand how to solve such a situation is to understand why does that happen. That's the question that's guiding us. And to understand this, I'm sure that most of you already saw that specific matrix at least once. The Eisenhower decision matrix helps us to decide if we should do something, if we should delete something from our to-do list, if we should delegate or decide by analyzing if something is important or something is urgent. Then we go for the matrix. Theoretically, we should focus on distributing this, but in reality, it is that we focus on the urgent things. We are human beings. We are not super rational as the matrix expect us to be. In the day to day, when your boss brings something to your table, when a fire is going on somewhere, you have a massive critical bug to fix, you need to put some energy on that specific topic, and suddenly you forget about what is important because the urgent is taking control over you. To make this more clear, A good way to separate both activities, imagine that you have the day-to-day activities that are the activities that act upon you, and you have the goals that you must act upon them. The day-to-day activities, are the urgent ones. You need it acts on you. It's something that pop-ups on your table. It's one email that you received. It's a support ticket that appear. They simply appear. You don't need to do anything on your day-to-day for these to appear for you. The goals, on the other hand, they are important, and you need to be the ones acting on them. It's something that you set with your team or with yourself, and you said, this is important for us. We should achieve such a thing. In order for this to happen, you need to be the one putting some time to work on such activity. Understanding these two concepts will help you and the team and whoever is watching here to analyze and distribute your day-to-day activities in something in one side, your goals on the other, but at the same time make sure that in your regular routine you're having enough time to work on both at the same time. Because if you go to the crowd, to your team, and ask, for instance, what are your product goals, people may think about it. But if you ask specifically for them, okay, what are your personal goals, some of you may have an answer, the others may have defined something in January but now forgot about it, and some others, okay, I have this very clear in my mind. What is important is if you don't know where you're going, any role will take you there, right? So if you don't know your personal goals that you are aiming to achieve, okay, anything that appears on in front of you should work. For your team, it's the same. If you don't define with your team where you want to be, any road will take you there. And the most important than this, it's making sure that you are constantly reviewing this. To make this more concrete, I would like to share with you the example from Indoor Viewer Portal, as we call it, IVP. That was a internal product I was working recently inside Volkswagen Digital Solution. And briefly explaining what this is about, IVP facilitates the collaboration between factory managers and planners for a better decision making with always up-to-date 3D building scans. It's a Google Street View for VW factories. You could enter there and find some factories, have some digital data that would help you faster take some decisions. And what exactly did we do? Because if I'm coming here to share with you that we overcame this challenge, we did something differently. What happened is that we implemented the 4DX, the four disciplines of execution, in an adjusted way for product teams. And these four disciplines, they go from focus on the widely important to the cadence of accountability. And during this presentation, let me explain you a bit each one of them and practical tips on how we implemented those and the effects that they had on the team. The first one is focus on the widely important goals, the widely important ones. How this translates into the day-to-day. The first thing you need to keep in mind is your goals. They must be simple and focused. This means that it should not focus on how you're going to achieve something, rather on what you are focusing to achieve. Everyone involved, meaning everyone in your team, should be able to understand it. Maybe your mom doesn't need to understand what this is about, but your boss, your team, and people involved in that ecosystem, they should read these and, okay, this is where you're pointing to, this is what you want to achieve. It's simple, it's focused, you can spread out there, people will read it and understand. Second one is your 100% focus must be on these objectives. They are the most important ones. If you define that something is your goal, it's your objective, it's something that you want to put some time on, it must be aligned with the expectation on top of you. Your team, your time should be put into this. That's your focus. Because if you define that your goal is to achieve A, but you know that your day-to-day people are asking you to deliver B, you need to make a decision, or you align with everyone that A is more important than B, or you shift that your goal should be more related to B. Third, you find somewhere in between to work on both at the same time. But this means that whatever is written there should translate to your 100% focus. To make it more concrete, I will bring the example from IVP. Our team name was Bowfinch, and the goal that we defined for 2023, not specifically the whole year, but a specific time frame, they were split in three different ones. We had something focused on the user experience to make sure that even though this was an internal product, we had a very good user experience. Second one was related to the team, for us at Digital Solutions, it's very important to have a good team dynamic, and we wanted to keep that with some quantitative measures to ensure that we were going on a good track. And the third one was about value generation on a business side, definitely at the same time user side, absolutely. And this is where the objectives that we define on a higher level. From these, we ended up defining specific measurable goals. For confidentiality reasons, of course, I couldn't share every single one of them, but here's just for you to have an idea. It's important to check it out that all of them, they have a very explicit from the beginning what we want to achieve, and have a specific time frame as well. It's the end of the year, it's the end of the quarter, how that look like. Looking only at these, you may found this structure familiar, and is no surprise for anyone that this looks pretty similar to OKRs. On the top, you have the objectives, then you have the key result. I would say that the structure you're using for this doesn't matter. It can be OKR or any other objectives and goal framework that you would like to use. What is most important from the disciplines of execution, from the four ones, are what you're doing on your day-to-day. The structure really doesn't matter, as long as you keep in mind that you should focus on the widely important ones. On our specific case, we had a workshop to define these. It took no more than 2-3 hours. We split it in 2 days, 1.5 one day, 1.5 in the other day, to make sure that everyone was involved and we were collecting the right inputs in order to do this, to have such a structure that everyone was happy with it. But this specific structure, these specific objectives and goals that we are having here, or objectives and key results, they have a problem. I will give you 5 seconds to look at this and guess what is the problem with such a thing. Thumbs up. Maybe not, if not 5 seconds, but let's keep going on. And the problem here is that those points, they are leg measures. And what does leg measure means? By this time, you probably heard about the concept of lead and leg measure. And this connects with the second discipline. You need to act on the lead measures. To make it more visual, you can imagine that the leg measures are those rocks. The lever are your lead measures. You can influence your lead measures, and by influencing the lead measures, you can predict the move of the leg measure. To make it more specific, we could imagine that if I want to lose weight, that's the classic example. My weight is a leg measure. I have X kilograms. I want to have X minus 5 kilograms. It takes a while for me to lose those 5 kilos. At the same time, it's easy for me to track how many times I go to the gym on a weekly basis. That's my lead measure. I know that if I go to the gym, let's say 5 times a week, it's easily trackable because a week only have 7 days. I can constantly check if I'm going to 5 out of those 7, and I know that by frequently going to the gym, this helps me to move the rock. This helps me to lose weight and helps me to achieve my goal. This is about the second discipline, act on the lead measures. To bring to a more product-related example, we can think about the following key result. Let's go with OKRs, really. Let's say we want to go from 30 to 50 NPS score by December 2024, by the end of the year. The problem with such a quantitative objective with these key results is that we can only know if we achieve a 50 NPS score by December 2024 is in December 2024. So this means that in July, maybe I have already an NPS score of 70. But if it's December and my NPS score is 40, I didn't achieve my goal. This is a clear example of a lag measure. I can only know if I achieve such a thing by the deadline of such a thing. At the same time, I can look at this and know that feature adoption is something I could take a look that would help me influence and understand if the NPS score will move in a positive way or no. Or I could use to the average referral per user. If people are referring my product to other people, if they're promoting my product out there, I could also take a look to user retention. Do they continue using my product? Perhaps it can influence their satisfaction. And many other things that could help with your net promote score. And all of those 3, 4 countless examples, they are lead measures. They're things you can act on a regular basis that helps you impact your major goal, your lag measure one, in this case, the NPS. Second discipline is about acting on those lead measures. It's important to have defined your objectives, your goals at the beginning, the ones that are important, but on your day to day, you need to find those ones you can easily influence, and they can help you predict some move on the big ones, on the ones that you care about. The third discipline is keep a compelling scoreboard. This is quite interesting because so far the first two parts, they're pretty easy, I would say. You define a workshop, you sit together with the team, you ask them what is important, you write it down, you go from that to the lead measures, those that you can influence on your day to day. But here it's more about your routine, and the scoreboard will help a lot with this. The first thing to keep in mind with the third discipline is to understand if you're winning or losing. We're having Euro right now. So imagine that you're watching a football game. Knowing if you are winning or if you are losing change completely how you will behave during that game. Imagine that you are playing as, I don't know, Portugal, Ireland, Germany, Brazil, any football team. If you're winning, you play in one way. If you're losing, it changed completely. And everyone in your team must have this information because the way how they will behave depends on this. The second one is a 5 seconds rule. Knowing if you're winning or losing is not enough. You need to know this answer in up to 5 seconds. You need to look to the scoreboard and know very briefly if you're winning or losing. Imagine you turn on the TV, your team is playing, you know immediately when looking to the corner of the TV if your team is winning or losing, if it's 0-0, if it's 2-0, and so on. You need to come up with something that in up to 5 seconds everyone can understand what is the situation. You can use colors to help you with this, or whatever your imagination can help you to design. And in order to achieve the 5 second rule, something that it's fundamental to keep in mind as well is the difference between the coach scoreboard and the player scoreboard. If you are the coach of a team, you have a lot of data that you're constantly taking a look at. You look to number of passes, of goals attempt, the metrics, the statistics from the previous match. You look to the data from the team that you're playing against. You have a lot of information. For the players, for the ones in the field, they only care about the scores. It's an even, are they winning, losing. And with the team is the same. Doesn't matter if you put all the velocity metrics, all the reports that you get from Jira, etc. This is something code related for the team, for the dev team, for the designers on the day to day, on a regular basis. You need a player scoreboard. You can have your code scoreboard with every detail that you believe is relevant and will help you achieve that. At the same time, for the day to day, your team, they need something simple that in 5 seconds they can get the answer. And here's one example from the team. Perhaps too many colors. I acknowledge this nowadays. Too many colors, but the important is for us, this was working. We were looking at this and just checking the percentages. Okay, this is good, this is bad. We can work on this one. This one is not going on the right speed. Let's check it out. And this is one example. We were doing as simple as on Excel, but you can come up with whatever you want. If you want something automatized, in our case, we were updating this manually. And how we were updating connects with the fourth discipline, and perhaps the most difficult one, because defining your goals, the widely important ones, this is easy, as I already mentioned. The lead measures from it, also easy as well. Designing a scorecard, a scoreboard, it's also easy. You just do it there. But when it comes to the routine, the accountability routine, that's the hard part. And that's the fourth discipline. I would say the most important one. Create a cadence of accountability. And this needs to be part of the culture. Build a culture of accountability that seeks for the achievements of the widely important goals with the right next steps. You need to review this on a regular basis. That's the first thing. Everyone needs to keep that in mind. Okay, we are striving for this specific objective, for those specific goals. And the structure for this specific meeting, it's pretty simple. You can go for account, you report on commitments, each member presents what they did that was working towards the achievement of the goals. You review the scoreboard, you learn from the success and the failures, you plan the next steps. Okay, based on this, let's do this, and that. As simple as this. The hard part is to add this to the calendar and make sure that everyone is following this structure. On our particular example, it came a lot from me as product manager. And I booked after we had the workshop to define the goals. Uh, the agenda, the calendar invite was sent to everyone. And in every 2 weeks, we were sitting together for a meeting just to review the objectives, achievements, the goals achievement. Was this accountability routine that we were having? It was a bi-weekly touch points every 2 weeks. And at the beginning, it's pretty hard because everyone goes immediately after the workshop. And 5 days, 1 week after the workshop, you don't have that many updates to give. The machine is still winning that momentum that you have, that initial friction to get the move. So what we did, we started using the meetings at the beginning for something that was connected with the goals achievement, but was not exactly. So we were using the meeting initially for two main things: to share key dates for the teams, to share announcements. Because I needed the team to create this routine of every 2 weeks we're sitting together to talk about something that is relevant for us. It's the goals, the objectives, and at the same time, key dates, announcements. Slowly, the team started to only talk about the goals because we ended up having more updates, more relevant updates about the goals that were worth it discussing. But to achieve this, I had to sit down and split the meeting between those 2 points: key days, announcements, other topics, and the goals. But after 1 month, yeah, 1 month, two meetings, the team, everyone was of purely talking about the objectives. They were purely talking about the goals. Important point is at the end of this definition process of your goals is to answer 4 questions. You design everything, you have the event, but make sure that once you define those specific objectives and goals, you know, by defining this, is the team aligned to those objectives? Will everyone work daily to ensure that these goals is achieved? If so, yeah, you can pass. This is a relevant goal. Second one, is it in the structure? You have the objectives and goal format that you can easily understand what's going on. If you have OKRs, that's your structure. That's it. If so, move ahead. Is it simple? Can everyone in all the levels of this organization understand this? If so, yes, that's clear. Let's go. And the last one, does it focus on what, not how? Don't say we want to and then describe how you're going to do that thing, but actually what you're looking for, what you want to achieve. Leave the how for the strategies. And at this moment, you may ask, okay, what were the results? Because I'm sharing all those tips, those 4 disciplines from the amazing book, 4 Disciplines of Execution. But what were the results? Initially, we had more goals, but at the end, if you pay attention to one of the slides, some of the goals they were deprioritized. So we had at the end of our time frame 9 goals, and out of those 8 were achieved, and 6 were overly overachieved. So with more than 100% of achievement, which was amazing for us. On average, we had 161% of goal achievement, and most importantly, out of all of these, the ownership within the team increased incredibly. Everyone was taking care of this. So if we had something more related to user experience, one developer was responsible, was driving that code. Not necessarily he was the one crafting it, acting on it, but at the same time, he was the one with the hat and making sure that no one in the team was forgetting about it. And this is a bonus tip. Make sure that every single objective and goal, actually goal that you have, key result if you're using OKR, have one person to drive it. It can be a developer, a designer. And if you can cross, if it's something more related to design, that usually a designer would take the lead. If you can put the developer to work on that, the designer will still be the responsible to do it, but the developer will be accountable. He or she has the responsibility to make sure that no one forgets about it. And the main learning after all of this, I can tell you that we keep using this structure, we keep using this with the other teams, end up moving team and going to a different challenge, and same structure is in place. And the main learnings are 4 things. The first one is prepare yourself to be a role model. If you don't have such a routine, such accountability routine, you need to be the ones pushing the team and bringing the good practices for this specific framework for the 4DX. The second one is right on the sand. Perhaps this doesn't make that much sense in English, but it makes in Portuguese. You need to write something and feel okay for the water to come in and clean that so you can adjust. Especially if you're pre-go live, if you are developing an internal product or any other product that you don't have a very clear basis of what you want to achieve in terms of active users or conversion rate, etc. You need to write something that you can start working on. As the data comes, you update it to make it sense. Third one, don't limit to the product team. And this is connected with our context, but don't limit to the people really working core on that specific product. Involve the more people that you believe would make sense there, other departments, other people that have a take on that, because it will be important to have the buy-in from other people. And only keep the ones you can act on. That's a clear one. That don't add something to your OKRs or to your goals, to your objectives that depends exclusively on someone else, that you cannot do anything in order to impact that specific metric. Hope that you enjoyed. You can find more about me in this QR code. Thank you so much. And if you have any question, well, feel free to jump here, leave here in the comment section, or reach me out on LinkedIn, on Instagram, where I write content in Portuguese. If you speak Portuguese, we can also talk there. Thank you so much.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Caio. Really, really inspiring. Lots of questions, if you don't mind. So I'll jump straight into them because we won't get to all of them. The first one is around going back to point number 2. So act on measures. How can you identify what are the levers? So the influencers.
That's a good one. I would say if they're more related to product, uh, I'm just hearing myself here twice. But if they're related to product, this tends to be an easier one, I would say, because we have a lot of literature that will help you with such a thing. If you're talking about monthly active users, for instance, that is usually a metric that we tend to define. You can take a look to acquisition. You can take a look to churn and check out what are the metrics related to those ones. Something that perhaps can help also with this is to design a metrics tree or a constellation of metrics, because you will start seeing all the metrics related to each other. And by doing so, it may be easier for you to find the lead measures that will impact the important ones for you. When it comes to more technical ones, if you have something, or even financial ones, I always recommend to have someone good by your side before the workshop. So if you know that something more related to revenue will come, or to costs, it's important to have some perhaps lightning talks before, or just one-on-ones, to understand a bit more of what is going on. And on the technical side, if you have a tech lead in your team or a more senior dev, count on him or her to help you building up this metric constellation of metrics, or metrics tree, whatever name you want to call it.
Fantastic. And can you give examples of how you and your team have worked in silos versus together? I'm assuming like that's more, how have you shifted from working in silos to more working together as a unit?
Good one. I assume that this is within the team, so a silo as individuals. So myself as product manager and the developer, I'm assuming that this is the silos. Something is important for me. It's every team I'm working on in the very first weeks. But if you didn't in the first week, there is no problem. I invite every single person to have a chat where I ask them 2 questions. The first one is, what is your story? And the second one is, how do you define your way of working? What is important for you? What you don't like? And if the person feels a little bit shy to share it, I start sharing myself, my story, where I'm from, where I study, what are my hobbies, what I like to do, and so on. This helps a lot to build this connection on a personal side. That for me, it's the basis for whatever will come later. Because once we establish this connection, it's easier to count on the other to achieve the professional objectives. This is one of the things that can happen, of course. The second one, it's more on the day-to-day one, the day-to-day basis, that depending on your structure, your company structure, you can take a lot of advantage of managers. If you have someone that's the boss of you, that's overseeing your team's career, or your developer, the designer, your peer, you can get some conversation with that person to understand if he or she has some tips on how to better establish this collaboration between every single person. Because for me, it's important to make sure that the collaboration is happening on a one-on-one, so myself and the other person, and multiply these by every single person in the team, so the whole ecosystem as a team, it's happening in a smooth way.
Love it. We don't have time for any more, and there's loads more in, but maybe online, if you could also touch on things like motivations of people are different. So how, it's hard to motivate some people, that everyone has a different motivation or personalities or drive or rewards. So that could be another one to touch on as well. Caio, that was really, really fantastic. Thank you so much for that, and hope to see you again soon.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, everyone, and also for the question. Reach me out, and hopefully I can clarify those missing ones. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Bye. Now, up next, we have Gareth. Gareth is going to be talking about mastering APIs as a product manager. Gareth, how are you?
Good.
Great.
Yeah.
Nice to have you. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and I will see you on the other side, and looking forward to hearing your talk. Bye.
Great. Thanks very much. Right. Just firstly, I guess talking about how do you motivate people, I guess you get to know them. So I'll try and let you know a little bit about me. I think we've already been through my name, so I'll skip that. I'm originally from New Zealand, but I've lived in the UK for a long time. So I now have a British passport. Halt and Catch Fire is my favorite program because one of the lead people is a product manager, which is not the case in any other film or TV show that I'm aware of. And I have both a design and development background, a bit of skin in the game there. In terms of my work, in the past, how many years now? 6-7 years or so, I've been focused on APIs as a product manager. Most recently at the London Stock Exchange Group. This is actually the focus of my life at the moment, really, and it's my little girl, Bella. Right. So, I have no idea how much people know about APIs, but I thought I'd better ground this talk in a little bit of information about what that stands for and how they're used. So application programming interface, that's what API stands for. Basically, it's the communication between two systems or two applications that usually, I think 80% of the APIs out there are REST APIs. You don't need to know what that means, just that they're probably the most simple APIs to understand, the very almost natural, language, the way they're formatted and things. So most of the payloads usually in something called JSON, which is the native JavaScript formatting. So yeah, especially developers find them very easy. And basically it means that you don't need to know the language of each application in terms of the programming language in order to maybe get the functionality or the data that the other application has, and you can use it in yours. And in terms of, you'd have an API platform as well. So that means all the common services of an API, it gets shared amongst a number of APIs. So things like authentication. I'm trying to do that arrows on my computer, and that doesn't work, I don't think. So APIs are very powerful. I may be a little bit biased, but anyway, I think most people have heard of these companies here: Expedia, OpenAI, and Stripe. I've never worked at any of these. OpenAI, I guess, is sort of the most relevant currently in terms of the fact that they're over half their revenue comes directly from APIs. It's really where people get to use their AI. Things like ChatGPT is all accessible via APIs for app developers. Surprisingly, this was 10 years ago. Expedia.com generated 90% of their revenue via APIs. So yeah, I would group API product managers into two different types. So I did touch on the fact that there's an API platform, which is all the common services and tooling around APIs. And there's also API provider, and that's a person who sort of owns the APIs themselves. So whether that be a functionality or a data category. So for example, in Modular, that was a B2B payments company. So there'd be different API provider product managers depending on the type of payment that was coming through on the APIs. So direct debit or SEPA, which is the European payments, or fast payments, which is UK. There were different people. And then I was both a platform product manager and an API provider one. At LSEG, as we call London Stock Exchange Group, I am purely an API platform product manager, and that's all I do. That's my day-to-day job, because we have hundreds of APIs and many API provider product managers. Often, if not always, the API provider product manager doesn't just look after APIs. That's just one of their roles, because we're far more data focused, and therefore they're responsible for a content area such as ESG, which is environment, social, governance data, and things like that. So and I guess so far it's been you might think of APIs as quite a, I don't know, not simple, but I think in terms of actually using the APIs. So typically a developer would integrate with an API and then use it. So an app like I don't know, your banking app is talking to the banking backend, or maybe other third provider backends via API. Now, that's quite a simple kind of exchange, simple process. It just goes and gets things and brings it back. API lifecycle is quite a complicated interaction. So you design an API, you have an API strategy, you do the documentation, you develop the backend, you measure usage, you have a API portal on the front end so that developers can consume your APIs, you market your APIs to other product managers, you version your APIs. Yeah, there's lots of stuff going on there. Generally, at the moment, a lot of language and stuff around the API lifecycle is very developer focused. But yeah, so I'm trying to bring that into the more of a product world, and those green highlighted things are more perhaps something that a product manager would be responsible for. So, well, I think I'll go back a little bit and just say that, well, as I was saying, like especially in LSEG, API provider product manager, that's probably a role like, I don't know, a product owner might be a role of a product manager, like an agile role, whereas an API provider product manager, API provider is a role that they have. And so some of those things that they might need to be able to do as part of that role, it makes it actually hard because they probably, well, no, they may or may not need to know a bit more about APIs than maybe the other channels that they're responsible for. So they need to understand their customers, which they need to understand for everything, but they need to understand that from an API's perspective, because their customers aren't just the product managers or whatever, the developers that are integrating. Knowing about the whole API lifecycle and what that means for them. And someone who understands, I guess, all the documentation and content that they need to produce as part of having an API out there commercially. I guess that's the other thing that I haven't put forward much yet, in that I'm really focused on commercial APIs, but there's loads of internal sort of LSEG to LSEG or whatever company APIs out there. Yeah, so, and they are, I guess, much more developer focused in terms of developers only need to know about them, and they're not marketed or anything like that. So yeah, so I guess what I'm talking about is mostly around the commercial side of things. API platform product manager, I think this is something that's fairly new. Usually maybe an architect would lead the platform team for an API. So I guess the expectation is that you'd be a whole lot more technical than the average product manager. As going back to the provider product manager, I don't think you have to be that technical to be one. You just need to know enough about developers. But the platform product manager really needs to it probably need to have been a developer at some point. They also need to understand what a platform is and how being a product manager around a platform, how that works. So that you have two sides. It's a bit like having a marketplace. You have the customers on the API provider side, so the internal customers, and you have external customers, which are developers and actually product managers and whoever wants to buy the APIs or use them. They need to know about the standards and guidelines around what a good API looks like and patterns around APIs. Not as much as a developer might, but enough that you can own your own company's guidelines. For REST APIs anyway, there isn't any universal standard. Sort of unfortunately, I guess, but it kind of means that every company needs to decide on their own guidelines, and really the platform product manager needs to be the person owning that. Yeah, and I own the API standards in LSEG. And I guess the other thing is you need to be able to work with designers and other people around user experience. So you've got, it seems more obvious to people around the API portal side of things. That needs to be a well-designed experience, especially for developers, but as I said, for other people too. But then there's also the internal one, which even people in the API world haven't really been focusing on much, and that's the API provider experience and being able to manage the API lifecycle as a product person. I won't get too much into API gateways because that gets a bit technical, but it's something that perhaps I didn't, well, certainly prior to my current role, I didn't really know much about API gateways, but it is very central to being an API platform product manager. But even as a provider, you need to know that, especially commercial APIs really need to be going through an API gateway. And they basically form your platform, so they'll themselves integrate with other services such as authentication in order to make it so that every API that gets onboarded doesn't have to worry about that, doesn't have to worry about things like rate limiting, which is a kind of security mechanism that means that people can only request the API so many times in a certain period of time. And I think the other thing is, well, the reason you need to know about this as a product person is that you're the one that ends up making the decision about which API gateway or API management tool that you'll end up using. Well, hopefully you get to choose. Yeah, so as I was touching on, there is a sort of a user experience part to the API product role. You have the external developer experience, so that's the API portal. But beyond, as part of that, you need to factor in more business-oriented people who are going to make the decision whether to buy the APIs or not that you provide. And therefore, part of that is being able to find the relevant APIs. So you need to think about that, and that would probably form one of your main decision areas around the portal. You probably would want something like a forum, and that's often doesn't come out of the box. Sandbox, so how's that going to work in terms of, for us at LSEG, most of our APIs are data, as I've said, are data focused. Therefore, Sandbox is usually, what data do you want people to be able to use without signing up to APIs? Or for modular, it was more functional. So how do you mock the functionality of APIs? And then how do you get people to be able to register for that experience? What do you think they need to provide to you? And then there's the whole experience, as I said, for the API providers. And yeah, we'll talk more about that. I think one of the things I've found is that there's lots of basic API portal solutions out there, especially if you have some sort of API management solution. Microsoft has just confused people by calling their API management solution APIM, which is what the acronym for API management solution is. Anyway, so whether it be Microsoft or Google or Amazon or Kong or all these different flavors of solutions for APIs, most of them only come with a very basic portal. And you'll either have to get a third party in to provide you with a better one, or you'll need to build something yourself. You'll at least need to brand it. So for one thing for me, I guess, going back to the LSEG thing, how does the portal handle the data-focused APIs? And then how do you automate the process to deploy, and if you're deploying an API to the gateway, which is where that's how the developers integrate with your APIs, you really want the documentation to come up into your API portal automatically as part of that deployment process. So you need to design all that. Now, here's the more interesting bit for me, at least. The API provider UI is something that doesn't exist. You have to build it. And I think the next slide is more, yes, this is something I can talk through for quite some time, if you let me. It's, I guess, the onboarding process for an API, and something people don't tend to think about too much. Ideally, you'd want the API providers to tell you about the fact that they're going to onboard their API, so hence register. Then you'd want really them and their team to be designing the API first before they build anything. Doesn't seem to happen much. And part of that is writing the technical documentation for the APIs. And really what you want to do is make sure that that's all good and goes again and is good in terms of comparing to what you've put in your guidelines and standards before they deploy it anywhere. The way we do it, we have a pre-production environment that they deploy to at that point, and then they do other gates. Now, this shouldn't be seen as something that is like one after the other waterfall. This is all, except for the design and deploying it to PPE, everything. Well, actually, you could start the other ones even before that, because there's gate owners who need to know about these things. And eventually, this is really talking about commercial APIs again. So I'm very focused on commercial APIs and getting them out there. The big thing about APIs is that once they're out there, it's very, your customers need to integrate with them. And so they need developers to do that work. And what you don't really want to do is have to get them to have a breaking integration and you versioning APIs all the time. So what you really want to make sure is that you've got something out there that's going to stay out there for a while, usually a couple of years or so. So a lot less iterations than would be normal in an application world. So hence, an API needs to be a little bit more waterfall and a little bit less agile in terms of a commercial API. And part of that is your teams being ready to support that API, and for all the documentation for all the customers to be all ready as well. So for me, the future of API product management basically is that more people will become API product managers. And more people are aware of APIs as a thing, as a product, as something that they can own as a product manager. And I think I've got a little bit of time. So API integration is becoming automated. Now, this would be a huge change to the whole API world. And I don't quite understand why it hasn't really happened yet at all. Essentially, if you take the whole manual integration piece out of it, then you can have more agile iterations of APIs, not to need to worry about that whole change management process so much. But then you've got to focus more on, so how does the automation, so the bot or whatever it is that's actually in doing the integration, what happens before that in terms of deciding on the API and then buying the API, and how does somebody buy an API if they're not doing it manually? if that's all automated. So there's a whole lot of stuff to think about there. Yeah, I think that's about it. Yes. So thank you very much. I thought I was going to go over time, but it looks like I'm a little bit under, which is always good. Yeah. So I guess I've only got my email address here, but I'm also on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to connect up there, I'm very happy to talk about APIs at any point. You're on mute, I believe, Catherine.
There we go. You think I'd be used to it by now. So there are a few questions, if that's okay. So
Yeah, sure.
how do you gather and incorporate feedback from developers during that planning phase? Developers and stakeholders during that planning phase.
Planning of the API in terms of designing an API.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess what we get people to do, well, first start off, they kind of explain what they're trying to do with an API, what their API is about, and then we don't really. Well, I guess we give them some documentation around the guidelines and things, and then they go away, and there's something called Open API, which is a standard way of formatting APIs, and they come back with what they think, a first iteration of what they think their API is going to look like, and then we give feedback on that. Yeah. So I have an API Center of Excellence team, and so I used to do all that myself, but now I actually have a team who does that on my behalf.
Yeah, could you maybe talk through your team structure? That would be very interesting.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I have a development team who works purely on, or mostly on the actual gateway itself and the things around that. So there's a few, they're mostly back-end developers. We use Kong, so mostly Go developers and things like that for plugins. And actually they're very DevOps heavy as well, so they need to work with infrastructure quite a bit. So we don't have sort of a separate DevOps team or anything. I also work with a designer, and I've got a BA who helps out as well. It's kind of a PO, really. She kind of is that role. And then there's the Center of Excellence team. So there's a couple of architects who specialize in API design, and and there's an architect across the whole thing in terms of API strategy. Yeah, so that's think about it. Oh, and I guess we have a technical program manager to help me make sure that I'm staying on schedule.
And how do you manage and incorporate that feedback into feature requests?
So I guess what we're talking about then is more the external developer and saying, well, actually, no, it's not. So there's, yeah, most of our feedback comes from more product manager level, in terms of functionality of the gateway and what they want to see, or how they want to be able to, especially things like rate limiting and specific things they need around that. So there's all sorts of things. So we also have things like private link and all that kind of stuff. So that was when we were at AWS. So yeah, it really comes in from those product managers are close to their customers, and their customers have maybe said something, or they've noticed that there's certain usage patterns or something, or some issues, and they'll feed that back to us. And what we used to do is they used to pay for the the enhancements. So, but I think we're doing most of it these days.
Nice. And last question, what emerging trends do you see in API development and management?
AI is the big thing, I guess. In terms of, especially in terms of finding APIs and things like that, what we're going to have on our new API portal we're putting together at the moment with a third party is a search based on ChatGPT. So it'll be a lot easier for people to find the APIs, and not only that, but they'll automatically, generate all the instructions of how to integrate with that particular API.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thank you very much for that and for the talk. Really appreciate it. Your session will be available on the website as of next week for everybody to tune in again. So thank you very much, Gareth. Really appreciate it. Sorry, cut you off a little early there. We'll see you again. Thank you. Bye. Bye. And thank you everybody else for tuning in. That is it for tonight. Next week we have up 2 talks on optimizing UX in AI-based technical products by Kushali, who's from Senior UX Designer for AWS. And then we have Mastering the Art and Science of Payment Design with Ramon from Marqeta. So thank you again to Caio and Gareth for 2 very insightful talks. Both talks will be available on the UXDX website, and we'll share them on socials for everybody to watch again. And please do follow them on LinkedIn and reach out directly if you've got any questions. Thank you again, everyone, and good afternoon, good night, and we'll see you next time. Bye.